My name is Harper and I'm 36 years old. 2 years ago, two sisters walked into my house carrying everything they owned in a single grey duffel bag. By the end of that year, one judge would change all of our lives forever. But before that happened, someone tried to tear our family apart. That someone was my own mother. When people hear that, they usually expect shouting, slammed doors, or dramatic arguments. The truth was much quieter, and somehow much crueler. It began with a smile. I had worked as a pediatric ICU nurse in Dayton, Ohio, for more than 12 years. Long shifts, sleepless nights, and heartbreaking conversations had taught me one thing. Every child deserves someone who refuses to give up on them. After my divorce, my little craftsman house felt painfully empty. I spent weekends repairing walls, painting bedrooms, and convincing myself I was building a new life. Then one Tuesday afternoon, while I was halfway through a 12-hour shift, my phone rang. The foster care coordinator didn't waste time. "Harper, we have 2 sisters who need placement today." I said yes. Before she finished the sentence, that Friday evening, they arrived carrying one faded grey duffel bag between them. The younger sister, Sadie, was only 5 years old. She had bright curls, missing front teeth, and the kind of smile that made strangers smile back. Her older sister, Nora, was 13. She didn't smile. She stood perfectly still on my porch, carefully studying every corner of the house before stepping inside. I'd seen that look before. Not in foster children, in trauma, patience, people who had learned. Survival meant noticing every exit. "Welcome home," I said gently. Nora nodded. "Thank you, ma'am." Those were the only words she spoke that night. I showed them their bedroom, clean towels, fresh pajamas, and drawers that belonged only to them. Sadie was asleep within the hour. Nora stayed awake. The next morning, I discovered why. While cleaning their room, I found the grey duffel bag hidden beneath Nora's bed. Still completely packed. Every shirt folded, every toothbrush ready, every pair of shoes facing the zipper. She wasn't unpacking because she didn't believe she was staying, and, somehow, that broke my heart more than anything written in her case file. The next morning, I made pancakes. Not because I was trying to impress the girls, because pancakes were the only breakfast my grandmother made every Saturday. And somewhere deep inside me, I hoped the smell alone might tell them something words couldn't. This house is safe. Sadie smiled the moment she saw the syrup. Nora thanked me quietly, ate every bite, washed her own plate, dried it, and placed it back in the cabinet, exactly where she'd found it. She moved like someone trying not to leave fingerprints. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing little things. She always asked permission. Before taking an apple, before getting a second blanket, before using the shampoo in the shower, she apologized. Whenever she laughed too loudly, she folded every piece of laundry with military precision. And every single night, she checked that grey duffel bag before going to bed, not opening it, just making sure it was still there, like an emergency exit. Sadie, on the other hand, slowly began acting like a normal 6-year-old. She colored pictures for the refrigerator. She danced around the living room in socks. She left toys everywhere. Every tiny mess felt like proof that she was beginning to believe she belonged. Nora never made a mess. She made herself invisible. One afternoon I found her helping Sadie with homework while cooking grilled cheese sandwiches. "You don't have to do everything," I told her gently. "I know," but she didn't stop. That answer stayed with me. A few days later, I asked her something simple. "What do you like to do for fun?" She stared at me as though I'd spoken another language. Finally, she shrugged. "I don't know. No child should have to think. That long before answering a question like that. That night I sat awake thinking about everything she'd already lost. Not just parents, not just homes. She'd lost the chance to simply be a kid. One Saturday, I suggested we paint the empty bedroom walls. Sadie picked bright yellow. Nora quietly chose soft sage green. We spent the entire afternoon covered in paint. For the first time, I heard Nora laugh. It wasn't loud. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was real. Pretended not to notice. Some moments disappear the second you point at them. Later that evening, while putting brushes away, I looked upstairs. The grey duffel bag was still under her bed. Still packed. Still waiting. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, routines formed. Movie nights every Friday. Pizza every other Saturday. Hot chocolate whenever it rained. Little traditions that stitched strangers into something closer to family. Sadie started calling my house home. Nora never did. She always called it your house. Not our house, your house. One evening I gently asked why. She looked down at the floor. If I call it home, she hesitated. It hurts more when I have to leave. I couldn't answer because I knew she believed every word. Instead, I simply said, "You don't have to earn a place here." She gave me a small smile. The kind people wear when they appreciate kindness, but don't believe it yet. That night, after both girls were asleep, I walked through the hallway. Sata, walls were still almost empty. No family pictures. No memories hanging anywhere. Just blank paint. I suddenly realized something. Maybe Nora wasn't the only one living like she was. Temporary. Maybe I had been waiting for someone to tell me to leave. 2. I stood there in the quiet house and made a promise. Whether it took months or years, I would keep showing those girls the same thing every single day. Not with speeches, not with promises, with consistency. Because trust isn't built in one big moment. It's built in 1,000 ordinary ones. I just didn't know someone else had already decided to test that promise. And her name was Carol. The first time my mother met the girls, she arrived carrying her famous lemon cake and wearing the same warm smile everyone at church adored. To anyone else, she looked like the perfect grandmother. To me, she looked like home. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Dad followed behind her, quietly carrying the Sunday newspaper under one arm. My younger sister, Rachel, showed up 15 minutes late, talking on her phone about a real estate closing before she even stepped inside. Sadie peeked around the corner of the hallway. The moment my mother saw her, her face lit up. "Oh, look at you," she exclaimed, kneeling down with open arms. "What a beautiful little angel." Sadie giggled as Grandma hugged her tightly. For a moment, everything felt normal. Then my mother stood up and looked at Nora. The smile didn't disappear. It simply changed. Instead of walking over to hug her, she stayed where she was. "So," she said politely, "you're the older sister." "Yes, ma'am," Nora answered. "What grade are you in?" "8th. Doing well in school." "Yes, ma'am." "Ever been suspended?" Nora blinked. "No, ma'am." "Any behavioral issues?" "No, ma'am." "Were there problems in your previous foster homes?" Nora hesitated just long enough for me to notice. I don't know. The room suddenly felt smaller. This wasn't a conversation. It was an interview. I stepped in with a smile. "Mom, why don't we eat before everything gets cold?" She laughed lightly. "Oh, I'm just getting to know her." But I noticed something. She hadn't asked Nora what she liked. She hadn't asked about her favorite subject, her favorite food, her hobbies. Only questions about what might be wrong with her. Dinner, Moved on. Dad mostly stayed quiet. Rachel complimented Sadie's manners several times. She's just adorable, she said. So easy to love. The words landed harder than she realized. I glanced toward Nora. She kept eating without reacting. Years of practice had taught her how. After dessert, Mom wandered through the house, admiring every room. When she reached the girls' bedroom, she smiled at the decorations. You've done such a lovely job. Then she noticed the gray duffel bag, tucked neatly beneath Nora's bed. She pointed at it. Why is that still packed? Nora answered before I could. It just is. Mom looked at me. You should encourage her to unpack. I will, I replied gently. When she's ready, Mom gave a small nod. I suppose. But something in her expression shifted, almost disappointed. As everyone prepared to leave, Mom hugged Sadie again. She kissed the top of her head. You are just the sweetest little thing. Then she turned toward Nora. Instead of a hug, she offered a handshake. Nora accepted it politely. Watched my daughter's face carefully. She never showed disappointment. That was the heartbreaking part. She expected it. Outside, after everyone climbed into their cars, Mom hugged me tightly. I know you're trying to do something wonderful, she whispered. I really do. Relief washed over me. Maybe. I'd imagined the tension. Maybe everything would be okay. Then she leaned closer and quietly added, You don't have to keep both of them. Harper. Time seemed to stop. I slowly pulled back. What? She smiled as though she'd offered perfectly reasonable advice. The little one will adjust. Anywhere. She glanced toward the house. But the older girl, her voice dropped. Some children are simply too damaged. I stared at my own mother, unable to believe what I'd just heard. Nora is a child, I said firmly. So is Sadie. They're sisters. They stay together. Mom sighed. I'm only thinking about your future. No, I answered quietly. You're deciding theirs. Her smile disappeared. Neither of us said another word. She climbed into Dad's car. They drove away, stood in the driveway, long after the taillights disappeared. For the first time, I realized the biggest challenge to becoming a family wasn't going to come from the foster care system. It was going to come from my own family, and I had no idea just how far my mother was willing to go. Life settled into a routine, or at least that's what I wanted to believe. Every morning, I packed lunches before sunrise. Every afternoon, Mrs. Petty, my retired next-door neighbor, met the girls at the bus stop whenever my ICU shift ran late. Every evening, our little house grew louder. Sadie filled it with laughter. Nora filled it with quiet strength. Little by little, the walls finally started feeling like they belonged to someone. Then my mother started calling more often. At first, it seemed harmless. Can I take Sadie to the zoo this Saturday? I smiled politely. Both girls would love the zoo. A long pause. Oh, I was only thinking about taking Sadie. They're sisters. I reminded her. They go together. She laughed softly. Harper, don't make everything so complicated. I'm not. I'm keeping my family together. She ended the call quickly. A few days later, another invitation. This time, it was shopping. I found the cutest little dress for Sadie. What about Nora? Oh, teenagers don't really enjoy shopping with grandmothers. I knew that wasn't true. What wasn't true was pretending this wasn't intentional. Again, I answered the same way. Both girls. Or neither. By the third invitation, I wasn't hearing generosity anymore. I was hearing strategy. Every offer included only Sadie. Every plan quietly erased Nora. At Sunday dinner, I decided to say it out loud. The girls are a package. Deal. If one is invited, so is the other. Dad nodded silently. Rachel looked down at her. plate. Mom smiled politely. Of course, but her eyes never agreed. A week later, the phone rang while I was charting patient notes during my lunch break. It was Rachel. Can we grab coffee tomorrow? Rachel never asked for coffee. She preferred drive-thrus and speakerphones. Something felt off. The next afternoon, we sat across from each other at a small cafe. She started, gently, "You've done something amazing. I'm proud of you." I thanked her. Then came the turn. "Have you really thought about what's best for Sadie?" I stared at her. "What does that mean?" Rachel stirred her coffee without looking up. "I mean, she could have such a normal life. School, grandma, holidays, a family without all the—" She stopped. "Without all the what?" She sighed. "Nora has a lot of trauma. There are group homes that specialize in older kids. They'd know how to help her." I felt my stomach tighten. "She's not a case file. She's my daughter." Rachel looked almost disappointed. "Mom talked to someone. She said adoptions like this can still be—" She searched for the word. "Reconsidered." That word hit me like ice water. Who did Mom talk to? Rachel suddenly glanced at her watch. "I have another appointment." She stood, hugged me quickly, and walked away. She never answered. Driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about that single word. Reconsidered. It wasn't advice anymore. It was a plan. Meanwhile, things at home slowly began changing. Nora became quieter again. The laughter I'd heard while painting the bedroom disappeared. She stopped humming around the house. She dropped out of the school play. She started spending longer hours alone in her room. Almost every night, noticed the glow of her phone beneath the bedroom door. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, she gave the same answer: "I'm fine." Wanted to believe her. Instead, I believed time would fix it. That decision would haunt me. Because while I thought the storm had passed, someone else had already found a way around me. They weren't trying to convince me anymore. They were quietly working on the one person who had spent her entire life believing she was disposable, and by the time I realized it, the damage had already begun. 3 weeks before our adoption hearing, everything changed. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. I was sitting at the kitchen table paying bills when Nora quietly walked downstairs. She didn't say a word. She simply placed her phone in front of me. "You should see this," she whispered. I looked at the screen. At first, I didn't understand what I was reading. Then my heart stopped. There were months of saved text messages. Every single one was from my mother. Some were from Rachel. Every conversation had one purpose: convince Nora to leave. "If you really love Sadie, you'll disappear before the adoption. You'll only hold her back. She deserves a real family. No one will blame you if you leave. There are shelters that can help. Do the right thing." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't concern. This was a campaign against a 14-year-old child. I looked at Nora. "Why didn't you tell me?" She lowered her eyes. "Because kids who complain about adults usually get moved." She paused. I thought no one would believe me. Those words broke something inside me. For months, my daughter had been carrying this alone, not because she lacked courage, but because experience had taught her that telling the truth didn't always protect children. Sometimes it punished them. The next morning, I called Maria, our caseworker. Then I called Dana, the court-appointed guardian. Instead of hiding the messages, we submitted every single screenshot to the court, everything, every date, every text, every attempt to convince Nora that she didn't belong. The anonymous complaint against our home was investigated. The truth came out quickly. The pool incident had been completely misrepresented. Witnesses confirmed Nora had protected Sadie. The allegations were declared unfounded. Our adoption hearing was rescheduled. Finally, September arrived. The courtroom felt strangely peaceful. Judge Margaret Pruitt entered carrying a thick stack of documents. Before anyone spoke, she opened the file. The court has reviewed additional evidence concerning these children. Then she began reading. She read the anonymous letter. She read the investigation. Then, she read 2 of my mother's text messages aloud. The courtroom became completely silent. My mother's confidence disappeared. Rachel couldn't look at anyone. My father stared at the floor. When my mother finally stood and tried to explain herself, the judge calmly interrupted. "Mom, in this courtroom, love is measured by actions. Please sit down." Then she looked at me. "Ms. Lell, if your family pressures you again in the future, what will you do?" I answered without hesitation. "My daughters are not temporary. They never have to earn a place in my home. Anyone who asks me to choose between them has already chosen to leave my table." The judge nodded. Then she turned toward Nora. "Nora, Ohio law says this decision belongs to you. Do you want this adoption?" Nora slowly stood. She looked around the courtroom. Then she smiled through tears. "My whole life, I kept a bag packed because I believed every home eventually ended." She took a deep breath. "I don't want to be good at leaving anymore. Yes, I want this family." Before anyone else could speak, little Sadie jumped out of her chair. "Me too. We're staying with Harper forever." The entire courtroom laughed through tears. Judge Pruitt smiled. She signed the adoption papers. 1 signature for Sadie, 1 signature for Nora. Then she looked at all 3 of us. "As of today, you are, in every legal sense, a family." Those were the words we had waited an entire year to hear. Outside the courtroom, my mother stood near the elevator. She looked at me. "You'll regret choosing them over your family." I looked back calmly. "They are my family. You were invited. You chose not to be part of it." She said nothing. She stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, and with them, a chapter of my life quietly ended. Months later, the first amended birth certificates arrived in the mail. Nora stared at hers for several minutes. Then she smiled. For the very first time, she wrote her new name aloud, Nora Lell. That afternoon, she carried a hammer into the living room. She hung our adoption photo on the wall. It became the first family picture ever displayed in my house. Slowly, the empty walls filled with birthdays, vacations, school photos, Christmas mornings, life. One evening, while packing for a trip to Lake Erie, Nora pulled the old grey duffel bag from the closet. I froze. She smiled. "This bag finally gets to be luggage." We filled it with towels, swimsuits, snacks, and sunscreen. Not emergency plans, not escape routes, just the ordinary things families pack for vacation. That was the moment I knew. She no longer carried the bag because she expected to leave. She carried it because she finally had somewhere to come back to. Today, she still checks the locks every night. Old habits don't disappear overnight, but now, she checks them from inside her own home. Her name is on the mailbox. Her picture hangs on the wall. Her little sister sleeps safely down the hall, and her bed will always be waiting for her, because real family isn't built by blood alone. It is built by the people who refuse to let you walk away, believing you were never worth keeping. If someone in your life has ever chosen you when it cost them something, tell them today, because love isn't measured by words. Love is measured by the people who stay. The end.